Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for choosing Across the Fence. I'm Will Michael in this afternoon for Fran Stoddard. It is the fourth Wednesday of the month, and that means it's time to welcome in Mark LaBarr, our conservation biologist for Audubon, Vermont, with our monthly Bird Notes program. Mark, always great to have you.
Always great to be here, Will.
Now, you were with us in January, and in January we were talking about December and the Christmas bird count.
Right.
And today I understand you have a similar sort of citizen science project.
Yeah, so this is called the Great Backyard Bird Count, and it's a little bit different. The Christmas bird count has been going on for 100+ years. The backyard bird count, the Great Backyard Bird Count, maybe 20+, and it's a combined effort between the Cornell Lab of Ornithology and Audubon, and it differs a little bit in that folks can go out birding wherever they want. It's a 3-day, 4-day period that they can report their information back to Cornell primarily through eBird.
Okay.
So folks can go out multiple times to multiple places. They're not restricted by that kind of the count circle of the Christmas bird
regional
count.
Or also a national count?
It's a national, it's an international count.
Okay.
In fact, I believe India this year came in with the second highest number of checklists, these online checklists. And so it's another effort to just get this global data.
And it helps with things like when your organization is looking at changing climate and impacts on certain species, this kind of stuff really helps.
It does, exactly. It can identify eruptive species.
Yep.
You know, a couple years ago we had great snowy owls that showed up. This year, not so much.
Okay.
But it can also see changes as birds begin to move with climate change, and it can pick those things up.
So it'd be interesting to see what's on the list in India. We'll hold that for a different program.
Time. Yeah.
So what were our regulars? What were we seeing, Mark?
Well, you know, the Great Backyard Bird Count, because it is a backyard bird count, often revolves around feeders. The one bird that we see here that weathers winters with most of us Vermonters is the Blackcapped Chickadee. This is a hardy soul. It comes to feeders regularly. It's here all winter. People see it. So a great bird, and usually ranks pretty high up in the Vermont numbers.
I got to tell you, I have them by the hundreds. We've talked about this.
Yeah.
But I also asked you about a bird, and this is a little unfair. We don't have a picture of it. But a bird that looks similar, but in fact the black band isn't below, on the eye, it's above it. And that's called?
I think the white-breasted nuthatch is what you're in.
The nuthatch is also there.
And so you'll see them at the feeders. They'll tend to oftentimes be on the suet, and they're called the upside-down bird because they often go upside down.
I knew you were showing the Blackcapped Chickadee, and I had this bird that was similar, so I'm just jumping in there because the next folks that we see all the time are Mr. and Mrs. Cardinal.
Right, and we always show pictures of male cardinals, adult male cardinals and all their finery, but really cardinals can come in a lot of different colors and forms, and so I threw this picture up there just because it was a good contrast. But again, cardinals are another regularly seen bird. They're in backyards, they're out in the countryside, they're very visible because of their colors, and so they often get recorded really high on the Great Backyard Bird Count.
And we see them in pairs. This is a bird that, do they mate for life, literally?
Not necessarily, but you will often see groups of them. I've had reports of upwards of 15 cardinals coming to feeders, and you will often see males and females, especially as the winter turns into spring and they start forming those pair bonds.
Okay. Well, here's the next one, is something I wish I had at my feeder. I don't.
Oh.
I love these birds.
Well, you're one of the few that don't, because this is the American Goldfinch, and we have been seeing them in numbers at the Audubon feeders, and people are reporting large number of goldfinches throughout Vermont. There seems to be an abundance of them.
I have too many black-capped chickadees.
Maybe. It's funny, at the Audubon feeders, though, the blackcaps usually will step back when you've got 75 goldfinches there. So this is a bird that probably, all the numbers aren't in yet, but will probably shine pretty high in total numbers flowers.
Black oil sunflower seed or something different?
So these folks will do the sunflower seed, but they also like thistle.
So that may be the other issue.
Yes.
I don't have thistle.
So if you have a thistle feeder, they'll take to that, and they're a little bit messier. They'll toss seeds all over the place.
So similar to my blue jay friends.
Yes, and then the last one is one that we don't necessarily see at feeders, but because we're an agricultural community, state rather, we see lots of European starlings. And this is the common blackbird that you would see around farms, on manure piles. You'll often see them in large numbers, but this is another bird that it's an introduced species in North America, but it's all over the place, and so shows up big time on this count.
So, as you mentioned, agricultural areas, that's something we might expect to see in a lot of different places, but there are certain species that are only going to show up in certain places.
Yeah, so, you know, when we think about that, and we think about different regions and different habitat types, you know, you go to the Champlain Valley and you'll find a suite of birds there that you tend not to see in the rest of the state. The first one being snow buntings. Now, snow buntings can show up. They're a field species. You'll see them along the roadside. They are white birds that flock. You will see them in other parts of Vermont, but you know, you see them in large numbers in the Champlain Valley. But a really cool one that you'll see on the big fields in the Champlain Valley is a bird called the horned lark. And those little feather tufts on the top there, this is a great winter bird. Again, you often see them with snow buntings and other things in the Champlain Valley, especially Addison County, areas like that. And then finally, another good one for birders this time of year that that doesn't breed here is the Lapland longspur. And this is another sparrow-like bird. And not as white as the snow bunting, but again, you're going to find them in mixed flocks in the Champlain Valley.
If I ever saw the horned lark, I'm pretty sure I'd never forget seeing that guy.
They're a good-looking bird, and they're pretty cool to see. Yeah.
Now, oftentimes, when we're asking about certain regions, you know, in terms of waterways, that's where we find a raptor like the bald eagle. Are there raptors that we're seeing as part of the Great Backyard Bird Count?
Oh, sure. And, you know, we get all sorts of raptors. Going back to the Champlain Valley, and I don't mean to necessarily hover there, but and we talked about this came up at the Christmas bird count, is short-eared owls. And they're a bird that you often find, and this one is a picture by Zach Coda, who, this one was actually in Richmond. And I was driving along, I heard the bird was there, and sure enough, I didn't look for the bird, I looked for the birders. And there were a couple people pulled off and got a good look at this guy.
You can always listen too. That helps. You're the one that can identify.
Yeah, but this time of year they don't sing as much. So you got to know.
Yeah.
Another one that you find in Addison County is the Ruffleg Hawk. And that's a hawk that comes down, can often be confused with a red tail, but it gets its name from those feathers on its legs there. So that's one that people would see.
And these aren't necessarily open water birds?
No, these are going to be open field birds that you see.
Another whole set of water guys.
Yeah, and you know, things like hooded mergansers.
Yep.
You know, these are a nice striking duck waterfowl. That male with that white patch on the back, and he'll flare that up. So they've been seen on the count. You know, great blackback gulls. Now, this is the largest gull in the world, and we have a population here on Lake Champlain that breeds, but they also stick around in the wintertime. And sometimes folks will, this bird is big enough that it can be confused with a bald eagle if it's caught quickly. So that's another one that showed up for some of the folks that were counting near the water.
And you did have a couple of others to pass along that were part of the count.
So, you know, this was seen again on the Christmas bird count, and we get them in the winter, the northern shrike, also known as the butcher bird. And it has a little hook on the end, and it gets its name because it sometimes impales its prey on barbed wire or hawthorn things. So this is a good one when it shows up this time of year. And then, you know, something that we see in the summer, not so much in the winter, especially when things start to freeze up, but the belted kingfisher. You know, you have any kind of open water, open stream. I heard one briefly down at the Audubon along the Huntington River. You'll pick a bird like that up, and you that's a good one to see this time of year.
Well, in addition to folks logging, we have viewers that take pictures and send them in. And this month, Colleen Hickey of Georgia was one. She sent in a picture here, and I think you mentioned back in January that the numbers of this particular bird are on the rise. Maybe not a surprise she saw it.
Yeah, so this was great for her. I know Colleen, and it was the first time it had come to her feeder. And so this is a bird that we talked about last time. We're seeing more and more of across the state, and this is exactly what the Great Backyard Bird Count and the Audubon Christmas Bird Count are looking to do, to kind of track these movements. So a great shot. It's always great when you feed birds, as you know.
Well, I was going to add, a year ago we had a picture. It was actually two. They were at my feeder, and I said to you, are these different birds? And what you ended up telling me is that one was a male and one was a female.
Right.
Strikingly beautiful. I mean, that's one of the best photos I've ever taken. I just love it was.
And people,
cool.
In the wintertime, we get used to our chickadees, our woodpeckers, downies, and haries, cardinals. So when that one bird that you haven't seen all of a sudden pops up and presents itself, a lot of backyard birders really get excited about that.
And again, as we started to talk about at the beginning of the program, these citizen science projects are really important. They're not only fun to participate in, but the evidence and information that gets recorded is invaluable to scientists like you.
And the way that it gets recorded, because all of this is entered, like I said, in eBird, which is an electronic checklist. So it's easily compiled, it's easily looked at. It's not in a paper form. So eBird has really become the predominant way for people to contribute their sightings to scientists for, for them to be analyzed and stuff like that.
Well, if anybody has a picture, if they have a question, we're going to encourage them to pass it along to Mark. You can send it to the address on the screen at Audubon, Vermont, and Huntington at 05462, or in this day and age, easier, pass it along to Mark via email at mlabarr@audubon.org. That's mlabarr@audubon.org. And Mark will get the questions and answers and pass it along next month.
Certainly will.
Thank you very much for coming in.
You're very welcome.
We know you have choices, so thanks for choosing us. I'm Will Michael, inviting you to join us back here each weekday afternoon for another visit across the fence.